This episode of Storytellers is brought to you by these fine companies.
There have been trials and tribulations in this thing. Some of them, when it was over, it was fun, but at the time it was very traumatic because we didn't know what was going to happen. And I'd like to tell you about my little brother and being so naive, never understood the relationship between Mexico and California, or the United States, for that means. Nothing against the Mexican people. I'm talking about it's different there. It's not like here. And this is a long time ago now. This is back in the early 80s. We had our Chaparral truck and trailer, and again, Fisher, Roy Mayhews, and Bob Fisher, Roy Mayhews, and Ted Schumacher, who was also part of our family guy for many, many, many years. Bless his heart. We busted our buns to get to Gainesville. It was probably the second time we'd been at Gainesville. And we were pulling a Chaparral three-axle trailer that we'd gotten from Dallas. And like I said, I did all the driving. Well, no sooner did we get to Gainesville in the first round. We didn't have a lot of extra parts. We always just tried to make everything work. We'd blown the engine up. So everybody's kind of on a downer anyway. But we stayed through the first day just to spectate. And then John, antsy as he was, he said, we got to get to California because I've got to hustle some money to get this car fixed. So we'd went to bed so late by getting into Gainesville late, and then getting up and then going to the track and having that fail. And again, hanging out at the track all night like everybody used to do till the wee hours of the morning. And then deciding to leave that next morning. I wasn't in real good shape. Wasn't drinking, but I was dead tired. So John says, you take the first shift. Okay, we're leaving Gainesville. You take the first shift, and then I'll spare you. I drove nonstop, with except Fort Stockton, Texas, where we had friends. I drove to Fort Stockton. I may have stopped one time before, I can't remember. But I only stopped when we needed fuel. And I never let it get below a quarter of a tank because I never could take a chance on us losing fuel. But John's sleeping the whole way when he's not waking up and talking about stuff. And then he'll lay down, 10 minutes, and then here he'd come again. I drove all the way to El Paso, Texas. It's about 2 o'clock in the morning. It's a Sunday night. And I told John, I can't go any further, man. I just can't. I'm not safe. And I hated for him to drive for two reasons. Number one, can he drive a race car? Not a question. Can he drive a car? Questionable. When I say that, not so much in a dangerous sense, but he has these little idiosyncrasies. One of them is a little dangerous. He likes to be facing whoever's in the back seat when he talks. And if he's driving, he has a tendency to stay on the bubbles, sometimes in the grass, okay? And everybody's sitting back there, Roy and Bob and Ted sitting in the back seat, and their eyes are wide open all the time. When I looked in the rearview mirror, and then I passed out. John has this thing with it on and off the throttle. Not hard, but he rolls into it, and then he rolls out of it. So when you're laying there, you're going. And when you're about to fall asleep, your head will fall backward like, can you quit doing that? What? He never knew what he was doing. And he never quit talking. I just go to sleep while he's talking because he never shut up. The guys in the back seat ignore him. Anyway, we aren't 5 minutes out of that truck stop there, the Union 76 in downtown El Paso, right by the border, and I pass out. And then I feel the truck bump, and I thought, oh, God, he's running off the road. And I wake up, and the lights are off, and it's pitch black. And I think, this is a dream, right? The guy's in the back seat snoring. And the guy knocks on the window. John rolls the window down and says, what's the problem? He said, you're on that stop sign back there. And John said, what stop sign? Now, you understand something. There was no freeway in Texas in them days. The freeways didn't exist going east until you got past El Paso. And when you came back from El Paso, there was no freeway between El Paso, Texas, and Phoenix. That was all highway. Didn't matter to John. John had stopped to do something, maybe to get a cup of coffee. But when he got back onto the freeway, or the regular highway, he missed the turn somehow. And what he'd done is he'd gone off on a side road. And back in those days, they didn't have border crossings and patrols and stuff in those days, and we drove right into Mexico. We were about 60 miles into Mexico, it finds out later, but I'm asleep, and like I said, I feel the car jolt, and I look up, and I see this guy he had like the Second World War Army hats, had a flat brim, you know, like Teddy Roosevelt and the guys when they took San Juan Hill. And I heard him say, you got to get out of the car. John said, I didn't run no stop sign. Well, typical Mexico in those days, what they do is they let you go through a little town, and then take a wheel out there. It's got a sign on it that says stop, and they think it's the middle of the street. Then they come back and they get you and say, hey, come back here, you run that stop sign. What, it wasn't there. So you give them 25 or 30 bucks and they go away, right? John and I didn't have 25 or 30 bucks. All we had was a closed bank account, bank book. And so I'm sitting there and I'm being quiet, and John's being really cool. And the guy says, you don't have no money? He said, no. He says, the fine was $35, $45. We didn't have it. So the Mexican in broken English says, then do you have to come with me, senor? So I'm sitting in the truck. They take handcuffs, and they handcuffed me to the steering wheel and took the keys out of the ignition. And I thought, they're going to murder us. You know, because Mexico, in them days, you got in trouble in Mexico, you stayed there. I mean, you couldn't get out of jail or nothing else. John got out with them, and when they turned the headlights on, I realized they were in a World War II Willys Army Jeep. And I swear to God, when they walked through the headlights, this guy was wearing a pistol. They just had khaki pants on, but they had old military shirts on. Okay, not like today's, but khaki-style military shirts. And but they were wearing pistols from the First World War, and I'm a gun collector, so I instantly recognized them as British Webleys, RAFs. They didn't have any spur on the hammer. They were revolvers, but I thought, God, these are really primitive guns, you know? So they get in the Jeep, handcuff John, and they drive off. I sat there, an hour goes by. I waked the guys up and said, you know what? You guys got to run for it, because they're going to kill us all. Yeah. Ted Schumacher says, we'll beat them to death. He was a fighter. He wanted to fight. Roy just sat there. Roy was a passive, total passive. He didn't say nothing. But John's gone so long, I really started to worry, right? And after about 3 hours, I see these headlights coming, and I hear gunshots. I think, oh, my God. I mean, in your mind, your brain's going crazy. What are they doing, right? Anyway, in the dark, I see these headlights coming. And all the time I'm sitting there conjuring up what's going to happen. Are they going to put us in an old jail and, you know, full of derelicts and drug addicts and winos and whatever? And like, I've never been in jail, and John either. But I'd heard so many stories about Mexico and what they do to you. Anyway, here comes this Jeep, and it comes around a corner. It's flat as a die out there. There's no weeds or nothing. But I see the headlights coming through the weeds and stuff, and I hear gunshots before I can see the Jeep. Okay? Now, it's pitch black out there, so all I see is the very outline of the front of this Jeep and the headlights, but I see these fireballs going up in the air. The Jeep pulls up. They leave the headlights on, and they get out. The driver gets out. He's wearing a Mexican sombrero that might have been a military hat, but if it was, it might have been Pancho Villa's. Probably not. But anyway, John gets out, and he's got an Army 45. John hates guns. Hates them. Everybody knows that. All his family, he don't want a gun nowhere around him. He gets out, he's got this gun, and he's drunker than Hooter Jones, I'm thinking, because he acts like he's stone drunk. The two Mexican cops get out, they're even drunker. They can't hardly walk. They're holding on to each other. And they're standing out there shooting these guns and stuff in front of the headlights. And I think, what in the heck is going on? Anyway, they're all shaking hands and hugging and stuff. Ah, yeah, amigo, everybody, and all that stuff, right? And then he said, "I'll see you later." And the guy says, "Oh, do you need my pistola, senor?" You know, and I said, "No, I need the handcuffs." I was handcuffed to the steering wheel. They come over and took the handcuffs out and let me go. And John got in the car, and I looked over at him, and he didn't look drunk anymore. He looked stone sober. And I said, "Let's get out of here." I said, "I don't know which way to tell you to go." He says, "I'll go back." It was straight road. He drove. It took us about 20 minutes. We got back to Interstate 10, which I said was not a freeway in them days. But he drove in there, and for 20 minutes we didn't say nothing. I said, "What could you possibly have said to those people or mimed to them in Spanish?" They didn't speak a word of Spanish. I'm sorry, you don't speak a word of, you're not very good at English, but you're terrible at Spanish. But these guys couldn't understand a lick of English. What did you say to them that they didn't put you in jail? Because I know you got no money. He said, "Oh, we went to a friend of his that had a cantina, and they started drinking beer, okay, Mexican beer and whatever." And he said, "Time just went on." I said, "I wrote him a check." I said, "You wrote him a check?" He said, "You know, the little bank account that I had in my briefcase that's been closed for some years." He said, "I wrote him a check." And he said, "They didn't take me to a jail." He said, "They took me to a cantina." I think they were just guys wanting to make some money, you know. Anyway, we got down the road a little ways. And I said, "You wrote him a check. How much you wrote a check for?" And he told me it was like $4,500 or something. Totally worthless. Never went back to Mexico, I'll tell you that.